Historical background. The British came to India in 1600 as a traders in the form of East Indian Company, which had the exclusive right of trade in India under the charter granted by the Queen Elizabeth I. In 1765, the company, which till now had a purely trading function, obtained by Diwani, that is the right over revenue and civil justice of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa. This started its career as a theoretical power. In 1858, in the wake of the Sepoy mutiny, the British Crown assumed the direct responsibility for the governance of the India. This role continued until India was granted independence on August 15, 1947. With independence came the need of constitution as suggested by the M.N. Rai, pioneer of communist movement in India. In 1934, the Constituent Assembly was formed for this purpose in 1946, and on January 26, 1950, the Constitution came into being. However, various features of the Indian Constitution and polity are the roots in the British rule. There are certain events in British rules that lay down the legal framework for the organization and functioning of the government and administration in British India. These events have greatly influenced our constitution and polity. They are explained in chronological order. The Company Rule 1773 to 1858, a Regulating Act of 1773. This act of great constitutional importance as it was the first step taken by the British government to control and regulate the affair of the East Indian Company in India. It recognized for the first time the political and administrative function of the company. It laid the function of central administration in India. Feature of the act. It designed the Governor of Bengal as the Governor General of Bengal and created an exclusive council for 4 members to assist them. The first such Governor General was Lord Warren Hastings. It made the Governor of Bombay and Madras Presidents subordinate to the Governor General of Bengal, unlike earlier when the 3 presidents were independent of one another. It provided for the establishment of Supreme Court at Calcutta, 1774, compromising on Chief Justice and 3 other judges. Number 4. It prohibited the servant of the company from engaging in any private trade or accepting presents or bribes from the natives. Number 5. It strengthened the control of the British government over the company by requiring a court of directors, government body of the company, to report on its revenue, civil and military affairs in India. Bit India Act of 1784. In the bid to rectify the defects of the Regulating Act of 1773, the British Parliament passed the Amendment Act of 1781, also known as the Act of Settlement. The next important act was the Bit India Act of 1784. Features of the Act. It distinguished between the commercial and the political function of the company. It allowed the Court of Directors to manage the commercial affairs, but created a new body called the Board of Control to manage the political affairs, thus established a system of double government. It empowered the Board of Control to supervise and direct all operations of the civil and military government or revenue of the British possession in India. It allowed the Court of Directors to manage the commercial affairs, but created a new body called Board of Control to manage the political affairs. Thus, it established a system of double government. It empowered the Board of Control to supervise and direct all operations of civil and military government or revenue of British possession in India. Thus, the Act was significant for 2 reasons. First, the company territories in India were for the first time called British possession in India, and second, the British government was given the supreme control over company affairs and its administration in India. Charter Act of 1833. This act was the final step towards the centralization in British India. Features of the Act. It made the Governor General of India as the Governor General of Bengal as the Governor General of India and vested him all civil and military powers. Thus, the Act created for the first time the Government of India having authority over the entire territorial area possessed by the British in India. Lord William Penning was the first Governor General of India. 2. It deprived the Governor of Bombay and Madras of their legislative powers. The Governor General of India was given the exclusive legislative power for the entire British India. The laws made under the previous act were called regulation, while laws made under this act were called acts. It ended the activities 3. It ended the activities of the East Indian Company as a commercial body, which became the purely administrative body. It provided that the company territory in India were held by its trust for His Majesty, his heirs and successor. 4. The Charter Act of 1830 attempted to introduce a system of open competition for selection of civil servants and stated that Indians should not be debarred from holding any place, office and employment under the company. However, this provision was neglected after opposition from the Court of Directors. Charter Act of 1853. This was the last of the series of Charter Acts passed by the British Parliament between 1793 and 1853. It was a significant constitutional landmark. Features of the Act. It separated for the first time the legislative and the executive for the functions of the Governor General Councils. It provided for the addition of 6 new members called legislative councillors to the council. In other words, it established separate Governor General Legislative Council, which came to know as Indian Legislative Council. This legislative wing of the council functioned as a mini parliament, adopting the same procedure as the British Parliament. Thus, legislation for the first time was treated as a special function of the government, required special machinery and a special process. 2. It introduced an open competition system of selection and recruitment of civil servants. The Covenant Civil Service was thrown open to Indians also. Accordingly, the Macaulay Committee, the Committee on the Indian Civil Service, was appointed in 1854. 3. It extended the company rules and allowed it to retain the possession of Indian territory on the trust of British Crown, but it did not specify any particular period. Unlike the previous charter, this was clear indication that company rule could be terminated at any time of the Parliament liked. Number 4. It introduced the first time local representation in the Indian Legislative Council of the 6 new legislative members of the Governor General Council. 4 members were appointed by the local provincial government of Madras, Bombay, Bengal and Agra. The Crown Rule 1858 to 1947. Government of India Act 1858. This significant act was enacted in the wake of the revolt of 1857, also known as the First War of the Independence or Sepoy Mutiny. The act, known as the Act for the Good Government of India, abolished the East Indian Company and transferred the power of government, territory and revenue to the British government. Features of the act. It provided that India henceforth was to be governed by and in name of the Her Majesty. It changed the designation of the Governor General of India to the Viceroy of India. Viceroy as the direct representative of the British Crown in India. Lord Canning became the first Viceroy of India. It ended the system of double government by abolishing the Board of Control and the Court of Directors. It created a new office, Secretary of State for India, issued with complete authority and control over Indian administration. The Secretary of State was a member of British Cabinet and was responsible ultimately to the British Parliament. 4. It established a 15-member Council of India to assist the Secretary of State for India. The council was the It established a 15-member Council of India to assist the Secretary of State for India. The council was an advisory body. The Secretary of State was made the chairman of the council. It constitutes the Secretary of the State in the council as a body corporate capable of suing and being sued in India and in England. The Act of 1850 was, however, largely confined to the improvement of administrative machinery by which the Indian government was to supervise and control in England. It did not alter in any sustainable way system of government that prevailed in India. Indian Council Act of 1861. Feature of the Act of 1861. It made the beginning of the representative institution by associating Indians with the law-making process. It does provide that the Viceroy should nominate some Indians as a non-official member of his expanded council. In 1862, Lord Canning and then Viceroy nominated the 3 Indians to his legislative council: the Raja of Banaras, the Maharaja of Patiala and Sir Dinagar Rao. 2. It initiated the process of decentralization by restoring the legislative power to the Bombay and Madras presidencies. It thus reversed the centralizing tendency that started from the Regulating Act of 1773 and reached its climax under the Charter Act of 1833. This policy of legislative devolution resulted in the grant of almost complete internal autonomy to the province in 1937. It also provided for the establishment of new legislative council of Bengal, Northwestern Frontier Province, and Punjab, which were established in 1862 and 1866 and 1897 respectively. It empowered the viceroy to make rules and order for the more convenient transaction and the business in the council. It also gave the recognition to the portfolio system, introduced Lord Canning in 1859. Under this, a member of Viceroy Council was made in charge of the one or more department of the government and was authorized to issue final order and behalf of the Council of Matters of his departments. 5. It empowered the Viceroy to issue ordinance without the concurrence of the Legislative Council during emergency. The life of such an ordinance was 6 months. Feature of the Act of 1892. It increased the number of additional non-official members in Central and Provincial Legislative Council, but maintained the official majority in them. 2. It increased the function of the Legislative Council and gave them power of discussing the budget and addressing questions to the executive. It provided for the nomination of some non-official members of the Central Legislative Council by the Viceroy on the recommendation of the Provincial Legislative Council and the Bengal Chamber of Commerce. That the Provincial Legislative Council by the governors on the recommendation of the district boards, municipalities, universities, trade associations, Samindar and chambers. The Act made limited and indirect provision for the use of election filling up some of the non-official seats both in central and provincial legislative council. The word election was however not used in the Act. The process was described as nomination made on the recommendation of certain bodies. Feature of the Act of 1909. 1. This Act is also known as the Window Morley reforms or Morley Window reform. Lord Morley was the Secretary of the State for the India and Lord Window was the then Viceroy of India. It consistently increased the size of the Legislative Council, both central and provincial. The number of members in the Central Legislative Council was raised from 16 to 60. That means 16260. The number of members in the Provincial Legislative Council was not uniform. Number 2. It retained the official majority in the Central Legislative Council, but allowed the Provincial Legislative Council to have non-official majority. It enlarged the deliberative function of the Legislative Council at both levels. For example, members were allowed to ask supplementary questions, move resolution on the budget and so on. It provided for the first time for the Association of Indians with the Executive Council of the Viceroy and the Governors. Satyananda Prasad Sinha became the first Indian to join the Viceroy Executive Council. He was appointed as a law member. 5. It introduced a system of communal representation for Muslims by accepting the concept of separate electorate. Under this, the Muslim members were to be elected only by Muslim voters. Thus, the Act of legalized communalism, and Lord Window came to known as the father of communal electorate. 6. It also provided for the separate representation of Presidency Corporation, Chamber of Commerce and University and Zamindars. Government of India Act 1919. On August 20, 1917, the British government declared for the first time that its objective was the gradual introduction of responsible government in India. The Government of India Act 1919 was the enacted which came into force in 1919. This act is also known as the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms. Montagu was the Secretary of the State. Chelmsford was Lord Viceroy of the India. Feature of the Act. Number 1. It relaxed the central control over the province by demarcating and separating the central and the provincial subjects. The central and provincial legislatures are authorized to make laws on the respective list for subjects. However, the structure of government continued to be centralized and unitary. 2. It further divided into provincial subjects into two parts, transferred and reserved. The transferred subject to be administered by the governor with the aid of ministers responsible to the legislative council. The reserved subjects, on the other hand, had to be administered by the governor and his executive council without being responsible for the legislative council. This dual scheme of governance was known as the diarchy. The term derived from the Greek word diarchy, which means double rule. However, this experiment was largely unsuccessful. 3. It introduced the first time bicameralism and the direct election in the country. Thus, the Indian Legislative Council was replaced by the bicameral Legislative Council consisting of Upper House, Council of State, and Lower House, Legislative Assembly. The majority of the members of the both houses were chosen by the direct election. 4. It required that 3 of the 6 members of the Viceroy Executive Council, other than Commander-in-Chief, were to be Indian. 5. It extended the principle of communal representation by providing separate electorate for the Sikh, Indian, Christian, Anglo-Indians, and European. 6. It granted branches to a limited number of people and basically property, tax, or education. 7. It created a new office of High Commissioner for India in London and transferred to him some of the functions that were performed by the Secretary of State for India. 8. It provided for the establishment of Public Service Commission. Hence, the Central Public Service Commission was set up in 1926 for the recruiting civil servant. 9. It separated for the first time provincial budget from central budget and authorized the provincial legislature to enact the budgets. 10. It provided for the appointment of statutory commission to inquire into the report on its working after 10 years of its coming into force. Simon Commission. In November 1927 itself, that is 2 years before the schedule, the British government announced the appointment of 7 members of statutory commission under the chairmanship of Sir John Simon to report on the condition of India under its new constitution. All the members of the Simon Commission were British, and hence all the parties boycotted and commission. The commission submitted its report in 1933 and recommended the abolition of diarchy, extension of responsible government in the province, establishment of Federation of British India and princely states, continuation of communal electorates, and so on. To consider the proposal of the commission, the British government convened 3-round table conference of the representative of the British government, British India, and Indian princely states. On the basis of these discussions, a white paper on constitutional reforms prepared and submitted on the consideration of the Joint Select Committee of the British Parliament. The recommendation of this committee was incorporated with certain changes in the next Government of India Act 1935. Communal Award. In August 1932, Ramsay MacDonald, the British Prime Minister, announced the scheme of representation of the minority, which came to be known as the Communal Award. The award not only continued separate electorate for the Muslims, Sikhs, Indian, Christian, Anglo-Indians, and European, but also extended into the depressed classes, scheduled castes. Gandhiji was distressed over the extension of the principle of communal representation to the depressed classes and took fast into death in Yarwala jail, Pune, to get the award modified. At last, there was an agreement between the leaders of the Congress and the representative classes. The argument known the Pune Pact retained at the Hindu Joint Electorate gave the reserved seat to the depressed classes. Government of India Act 1935. The Act marked a second milestone towards the complete responsible government in India. It was a lengthy and detailed document having 321 sections and 10 schedules. Features of the Act. It provided for the establishment of all India Federation consisting of province and princely state as units. The Act divided in power between the centre and unit in terms of 3 lists. Federal list for centre with 59 items. Provincial list for provincial with 54 items. Concurrent list for both with 36 items. Residuary powers were given to the Viceroy. However, the Federation never came into being. The princely state did not join it. It abolished the hierarchy in the provincial, introduced the provincial autonomy in its place. The provinces were allowed to act as autonomous units and administration in their defined spheres. Moreover, the Act introduced a responsible government in province. That is, the governor was required to act in the advice of minister responsible to provincial legislation. This came into effect in 1937 and was discontinued in 1939. 3. It provided for the adoption of diarchy at the centre, concurrently the federal subjects. were divided into reserved subjects and transferred subjects. However, this provision of the Act did not came into operation at all. 4. It introduced the bicameralism of 6 out of 11 provinces. Thus, the legislatures of Bengal, Bombay, Madras, Bihar, Assam, and United Provinces were made bicameral, consisting of Legislative Council, Upper House, and a Lower House. However, many restrictions were placed on them. 5. It further extended the principle of communal representation by providing separate electorate for depressed states, scheduled caste, and women and labor workers. 6. It abolished the Council of India, established the Government of India Act 1958. The Secretary of State for the India was provided for the action team for advisor. It extended franchise. About 10% of the total population got the voting right. 8. It provided the establishment of Reserve Bank of India to control the currency and credit of the country. 9. It provided the establishment of not only the Federal Public Service Commission but also Provincial Public Service Commission and a Joint Public Service Commission for 2 or more provinces. 10. It provided for the establishment of Federal Court, which was set up in 1937. Indian Independence Act of 1947. On February 20, 1947, the British Prime Minister Slim Attlee declared that British rule in India would be ended by June 30, 1948, after which the power would be transferred to responsible Indian hands. This announcement was followed by the action by the Muslim League demanding partition of the country. Again on June 3, 1947, the British government made it clear that any constitution framed by the Constitutional Assembly of India, formed in 1946, cannot apply to those parts of the country which were unwilling to accept it. On the same day, June 3, Lord Mountbatten, the Viceroy of India, put forth a partition plan known as Mountbatten Plan. The plan was accepted by the Congress and the Muslim League. Immediate effect was given to the plan by enacting the Indian Independence Act 1947. Feature of the Act: it ended the British rule in India and declared India as independent and sovereign state from August 15, 1947. It provided for the partition of India and creating of 2 independent dominants of India and Pakistan with the right to secede from the British Commonwealth. 3. It abolished the office of Viceroy and provided for each domination. The Governor General, who was to be appointed by the British King, advised of dominant cabinet. His majority government in India in Britain was to be have no responsibility with respect to the government of India or Pakistan. 4. It empowered the Constitutional Assembly of the 2 dominants to frame, adopt any constitution for the respective nation and to replace Act of British Parliament, including the Independence Act itself. 5. It empowered the Constitutional Assemblies of the both dominants to legislative for the representative territory till new constitution were drafted and enforced. No act of the British Parliament passed after August 15, 1947 was to extend to either of the new dominants unless if they extended thereto by law of the legislature of the dominant. 6. It abolished the office of the Secretary of the State for India and transferred his function to the Secretary of State for Commonwealth Affairs. 7. It proclaimed the lapse of British paramountry over the Indian princely state and treaty relation with the tribal area from August 15, 1947. 8. It granted freedom to the Indian princely state either to join the Dominion of India or Dominion of Pakistan or to remain independent. 9. It provided for the governance of each of these dominions and provinces by the Government of India Act 1930 till the new constitution was framed. The dominions were authorized to make a modification in the Act. 10. It deprived from the British monarch of his right to veto bills or ask for reservation for certain bills for the approval, but this right was reserved for the Governor General. The Governor General would have full power to assent to any bills in the name of His Majesty. 11. It designated the Governor General of India and provincial governor as constitutional head of the state. They are made of the act to advise the respective council of ministers in all the matters. 2. 12. It dropped the title Emperor of India from the royal title of the King of England. 13. It discontinued the appointment of civil service and reservation of posts by the Secretary of State for India. The members of the civil servants appointed before it would continue to enjoy all the benefits that they are entitled to till that time. At the stroke of midnight of 1415 August 1991, the British rule came to an end. The power was transferred to 2 new independent dominions of the India and Pakistan. Lord Mountbatten became the first Governor General of the new domain of the India. He sworn in Jawaharlal Nehru as the first Prime Minister of in, independent India. The Constitutional Assembly of India, formed in 1940s, became the Parliament of India dominant. Now let us see the ministers of India in 1946. Jawaharlal Nehru, External Affairs and Commonwealth Relations. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Home and Information Broadcasting. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Food and Agriculture. Dr. John Mehta, Industry and Supply. Jagjeevan Ram, Labor. Sardar Baldev Singh, Defense. C.H. Baha, Works, Mines and Powers. Likar Ali Khan, Finance. Abdurrahman Issa, Post and Air. Asaf Ali, Railways and Transport. C. Rajagopalachari, Education and Art. I.A. Chandrigar, Commerce. Ghazan for Ali Khan, Health. Jogindranath Mandal, Law. Now again is changes in Free India 1947. Now let us see that. Jawaharlal Nehru, Prime Minister, External Affairs and Commonwealth Relations, Scientific Research. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, Home, Information Broadcasting, States. Dr. Rajendra Prasad, Food and Agriculture. Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, Education. Dr. John Mehta, Railways and Transport. R.K. Shanmugam Chetty, Finance. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Law. Jagjeev Ram, Labor. Sardar Baldev Singh, Defense. Rajkumari Amit Kaur, Health. C.H. Baha, Commerce. Raf Ahmed Kidwai, Communication. Dr. Shyam Pradas Mukherjee, Industry and Supplies. B.N. Gogil, Works, Mines and Powers. Dasa. Thank you.